This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for How to Super Age with Elise Marie Collins. And before we get started, Elise, I have to thank you for some of the introductions you've provided us here at New Cleveland Radio because some of your contacts have been just phenomenal. They've made me look at life differently. And as I read the bio of your guest today, I have a feeling I'm going to be amazed once more. So let's go ahead and find out who we have today.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. We'd love to hear from our listeners, so feel free to look us up on the internet. My email is elisemariecollins@gmail.com, and we have another fabulous guest today that I can't wait to introduce you to. Her name is Li-Sann Mullings. She's a registered nurse, and she's been working in the holistic and energy medicine industry for close to 3 decades, including 10 years when she was the founder of Wellspring Medical Skin and Wellness Center in the Washington, D.C. metro area. Li-Sann currently lives in Southern California, and she has a company. It's called Sacred Alchemy Light Creations, and it supports people all over the world via her online healing circles, mystical retreats, and remote private sessions. And she's been called a light alchemist. That sounds fantastic to me. She's an intuitive, a sacred sound healer, shamanic energy medicine practitioner, spiritual coach, and multidimensional channel. And don't forget, she's also a registered nurse beyond that. And she profoundly heals and transforms the lives of all her clients. And I'm sure she will be doing that with us via her wisdom. I also want to tell you about her golden light meditation. I think she can tell us about that, but I'm just giving a little teaser for one of the things that I've gotten from her. It's a beautiful 5-minute meditation. But is there anything else you want to tell us about yourself, Li-Sann, that I missed in that introduction?
I think you summed it up very nicely, Elise. Thank you for that kind introduction. It's wonderful to be here. And thank you, Karen, for this great honor.
Sure.
And yeah, I could write several books, but let's keep it short. So yeah, you got it perfectly. Thank you, Elise.
So, Li-Sann, when you work with clients, you do so many things, including you're clearly versed in Western medicine, you have an RN degree, and you're, doing what I would call light work, or sometimes I even just call it core work. You're working with energy medicine, which is a very subtle way to work with people, but you may have a different way to define it. How do you work with clients? Because, and also, do you work with people that want to do more what I would call woo-woo work, or do you work with everyday people? Like my mom's not into woo-woo. Would you work with her? How do you work with clients?
Elise, I consider myself a bridge. So, in the Cairo lineage, which is one of the lineage of shamanic healers that I belong in, a Cairo medicine man or woman bridges the world from between the visible and the invisible realm. And so to transfer that into the way that I work with people is to bridge the world between traditional medicine and ancient technologies that really predates traditional medicine. Modern medicine is really very young. It's like the younger sister or brother to the arena. So I meet people where they are. And because I have such a deep understanding of the interventions that traditional medicine best serve, I can say to a client or a potential client, absolutely, you do need to see your internist or your GYN or so on. But I also understand the arena that's outside of the scope of traditional medicine, and that is the luminous energy field. So we have this aura, this torus field around us that actually is a record keeper for every trauma, every event that we have suffered in this current lifetime and in other lifetimes. The luminous energy field is outside of the scope of modern medicine. And unfortunately, for many people that I see, what ails them is actually not physical, even though it's manifesting in an organ system or a part of the body. What actually is the deep root cause is an unresolved trauma or an incident that got lodged, the memory, the imprint got lodged in the luminous field. And the luminous field is magnetic. So what it does, it pulls in like match to the imprints that it's holding. So the domain of the energy medicine practitioner, the domain of the shaman, is to intervene in the luminous field and really bring closure or healing once and for all to what ails so many of us.
Wow. That was a lot to unpack. And I must say, you also look very luminous, and I love your colors. I love your background. If you're listening, Li-Sann is a glowing being, and she emanates and she speaks from this luminous field. I find what you're saying very interesting. And I'm wondering how that, do you work with older adults, and do you find that they are more open to this different, the unseen dimensions?
Yes, I work with all age groups. I actually have a current client who is 3 months old, and she came into this lifetime with some imprints that's causing her physical body to behave in a certain way. So I've been slowly unwinding those imprinted memories so that she can, she can be free of what would ail her. But I have found that my most receptive are the millennials. They've already read up on it, they've Googled it, they're actually very open. And then after that would be the geriatrics, the older. And I think what I've come to discover in working with them and really listening deeply is that they already have started to have a sense of the invisible realm, the veil. They've lost a spouse or a loved one who oftentimes comes to them from behind the veil. So they are open to the understanding that there's something there that we cannot see or really adequately explain with the physical, the visible eyes, but that there's something there. So they're really very, very open to this field. That cannot be seen.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I study Ayurveda, which is Indian medicine, and that tradition separates your life into the different phases. One is childhood, being like a 3-month-old. And then there's the more fiery years when you're doing, accomplishing. And the later years are light and air. And so that's also why I wonder about that, because traditionally, now we're not, I would say Western cultures, maybe the older adults are experiencing life in a different way, but traditionally you would be going towards the light, as you mentioned. So I think there is that pull, which is very interesting. And I also want to underline, because this is how to super age, I always like to throw in a couple tips that people are already doing. I think we're all aware of how to age well or super age, but the best time to age well is actually when you're a baby or in utero. And there's studies that show that infants, or even in utero, what we do impacts you for life. Now you can't undo that. Like I like the way you said you can undo trauma, because if we do have trauma, and you're even introducing the trauma from past lives. So this is very interesting. But what I see you doing is you're changing this baby's trajectory, and that will ultimately, we can look on into the future. In 75 years, she'll be a different 75-year-old than she would be if she hadn't worked with you.
Yeah, I like to think so, Elise. And certainly the elders in my Cairo lineage would state that as fact, because what they teach us and what they strongly hold to be true is that the luminous field, our energy field, this torus field of intelligence, is our Akashic record. It's our personal Akashic records. And so if there's a distorted file in that library, when that file gets pulled out, triggered by, say, human experience, or even more interesting, the soul's decision to hand us an opportunity to heal and grow, which is all that really that's really happening, then that distorted record it affects the trajectory of our lives until we meet a shaman. Good plug for the shamans there, but absolutely. And the field is intelligent, and now we see a lot with quantum physics and quantum mechanics that really proves that there is a field that organizes every aspect of our life. But the shamans have long said that the luminous field, this torus field, it organizes the way we live, the way we age, the experiences we have, and the way we might die. Yeah.
Let's take a deep breath on that.
So are you saying that if you become more aware of what is around you, you can make these changes so that you are living healthier and making better choices?
That's partly true, Karen, but the recognition, it's a deeper awareness that recognizes that anything that's around you, anything that's in my world, good or bad, the field has called it in, the luminous field, through its magnetic, intelligent way, it calls it in. So I have called in everything that's in my world, everything that's around me, good and bad, for an opportunity to transcend it, to heal it. So the field is the puppet master, if you will. Yeah.
Interesting. And what would you say to someone? I mean, we all have times when we're struggling, and that's a part of life and aging, the struggles, and you feel like, why did this happen to me? Or you're just feeling like, why the hell did this? I could say worse words, but why the heck did the luminous field bring this to me? What would you say to somebody who's in that position? Because I'm sure we have people listening that are feeling like that right now.
Absolutely. Great question, Elise. And that's a question that I get a lot. 90% of the times, because people come to me when there's this repeating pattern. I date the same loser, but with different names. I attract the same boss who is a bully. And then I left the job and my neighbor is a bully, and on it goes. And so I get that question a lot when I, like, not at first bat, I won't say to them, well, you called us in, or the field called us in. But when there's a sense of comfort between us and that trust, I have a fiduciary responsibility to educate that person and to say, your field called it in, but don't despair, because what the field is under the umbrella of your soul. your higher self. So your soul decided that in this lifetime, one of the things that you're meant to transcend is, say, dating inappropriate partners. And so it kind of, it does this little powwow with the luminous field, and that's your higher self, your soul, and say to the field, everywhere within you that there's an imprint where in a past life or past lives, this person has had this pattern and it's brought them great suffering. Let's make a plan for this person to heal that in this lifetime so that they are free. They don't have to keep doing it in another lifetime or even in this lifetime for the next 20 years. So that little powwow, and this is just my kind of a spin on it, but it's, you know, to make it simple, that powwow happens in the end for our highest good. So even if it feels uncomfortable, and a lot of times the things that come up in life, they're uncomfortable, they're painful, but fortunately or unfortunately, pain is oftentimes the catalyst that prompts a person or humans to grow. If things were kind of easy and nice and it's just, it may be a little ouchy, then many people would just kind of continue barreling through it. But when the pain gets excruciating and we so-called hit rock bottom, it's, you know, that's when there might be that little light bulb that goes off that says, I don't want to live this way anymore. So I get that question a lot, but I also get the stake in the ground. I am tired of this. This is where it ends. And that's where we can begin to change this situation.
Fantastic. And you study Cairo shamanism. Tell us a little bit about that, how you came to study it and what lineage that is. It sounds very interesting. I'm really curious about it.
Yeah, so the Cairo shamans are from Peru. They're the Andean shamans. They are directly descending from the Laikas. The Laikas were the ancient medicine men and women in Peru before the conquistadors went there. I was not called to become a shaman until I had a very personal experience with a shaman. The very first time I went to Peru, almost 20 years ago. And I had healed a lot of my traumas and some of them came back, but it was like, oh, okay, whatever. I at least they're not so virulent anymore. I was living. And I was in Peru and met up with a shaman the very first day I got there. And he looked at my stomach area and he said to me, death is stalking you right there. And I was not happy. I said to my girlfriend who had been there before and we had gone there together, I said, what's he talking about? This is like creepy. And mind you, I'd done a lot of healing work, woo-woo work and all of that, but that was like a whole nother level. And she said to me, they're always right. When they track your energy, they're always right. They're tracking your field and they're seeing where the field has already manifested, say an illness or it's manifesting it. And I go, well, I had all my exams and stuff just a few months before. And she said, do me a favor, when we get back home, go check it out. And so I sheepishly called up my OBGYN and I said, I know I just had my stuff done, but hey, I was down in Peru and here's what happened. Would you allow me to go and do a sonogram? And she reluctantly agreed and she said, you might have to pay for it out of pocket. But by then I started having a vested interest in this thing because the man was so insistent. And I said, I'll pay for it if it comes down to it. When I went for that sonogram, they found a fast growing tumor the size of a grapefruit in my uterus.
Oh my.
With the big C thing, C label attached to it.
Mm.
And so two things happened. I got a chance to practice even deeper the energy path. And it gave me an answer to a question that I had wondered. How deep, what next should come into my personal healing toolkit for clients? And it was shamanism. And I will own that I didn't have the surgeries and all that. I had to walk my medicine in that moment. And I decided that energy, it's energy, and that energy would heal it. And so I asked my GYN, and she's wringing her hands and really upset because I'd seen her for a long time. We have a great relationship. I asked her for 6 months to heal it with my people, the shamans and so on. And she says, okay, it's on you. And 6 months when I went back, it was a very tiny, tiny, tiny little nodule now. And shortly after that, I was back on my way to Peru to immerse deeply with this ancient technology of the shamanic lineage. And the rest is history.
Unbelievable. I mean, that is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an amazing story. And you've been, so that was 20 years ago. You've been healing in the Cairo tradition and working. Do you travel often to Peru to study?
I do. Many years ago, I became a seated medicine woman in the lineage. I'm officially a Cairo and years, but I still enjoy going back into ceremonies. The shamans are big into ceremony and rites and rituals and sacred initiations. And so I love being in that sacred container. And every time I go, there's something else, that another perspective that comes in for me that I'm able to support people with, even at an even deeper level.
I want to talk about your golden light meditation, but before we get to that, I know you said Akashic records, and I'm not sure if everybody knows what the Akashic records are. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and just explain what you mean by Akashic records.
Oh, sure. The simplest explanation is, for every lifetime that we've incarnated as human, and even times when we've been ultra-dimensional beings, meaning we've existed in other dimensions outside of a physical body, our field, the luminous field, this torus field that's about an arm width out from us in a donut type shape, it holds the memory. So if we could, for example, imagine if I had an incarnation, say 11 lifetimes ago in Egypt, as a merchant, the luminous field that goes into my record as a life that I lived on the earth plane 11 lifetimes ago, and that folder. So if we probably think of the old time encyclopedias, that folder gets stored in the field as a part of my soul record. The soul's journey is eternal, and so the field stores it. And now Akashic record is also bigger. I don't want to get into the whole other piece of it, but at a simplest in a simple explanation, the field holds our personal record.
Wow. It's magical and all-encompassing. And do you find when you're working with clients, do you immediately go to their past lives, or is it a little of both? Sometimes it's some trauma they had this life, or how does that work?
Great question, Elise. It's a little of both. Actually, it's a lot of both. Know that, so anything, the shamans call it, the elders call it incident number 50 or 100. So no matter what's showing up in a person's world now, in this time, even if they can say to me, you know what? I first had an awareness of, I don't know, calling in bullies when I was a middle school girl, 13-year-old or whatever. I know, and if then that pattern continued, say, okay, and then it followed me to college, and then it followed me to my first job, and now here we are again, it's followed me. I know without even beginning to track, and shamans are master trackers. We track across all dimensions and timelines. Without even beginning to track her record, I know that the pattern is as a result of an original wound some lifetime ago, whether it's 20 lifetimes. And so, yeah, the first incident typically happens before this current lifetime. That's why it's here again, especially, and I don't mean, oh, I stumble and I stubbed my toe. That's like an isolated, okay, yeah, you just maybe weren't paying attention that day. I mean something that's like a pain point that's in a person's face. Yeah, always when I look. So I listen to what the current reality is, because for that person, that's all they know at this point. But then always part of the diagnostics, to use one of the nursing terminology, is I need to go into the field and I want to see, one, exactly what lifetime did this happen? What was the incident that was so traumatic? And number three, what was the contract that that person wrote in that lifetime? Because the contract is just as powerful. It's an energetic bah humbug that's creating the pattern also, or contributing to the pattern.
Wow. In Sanskrit, there's a word samskara, which you may have heard of, but just for the audience, samskara is a deep scar, a soul scar, and it actually is, the word scar comes from samskara, but it's like I think of it like a pattern. And we can see them. We can almost, I bet everybody out there can think of a few that each one of us has, where it's like, we wonder, why do I have this pattern? I was born into this family, like my brother, my sister doesn't have it, but we seem to, like you said, attract the bullies, or whatever, fill in the blanks, something that keeps happening. So it's very interesting, but you give us hope, because it sounds like we can clear these things. Do you have any stories of clients that have healed some of these, I want to call them samskaras, but they're past, they're deep wounds, so to speak?
Yeah, many stories. So I'll share with you a woman that I will call Mary for her privacy. Mary came to me, and she runs a very successful medical practice. She brings in a lot of money in her practice, and she also gets money each month out of a trust for her family, from her family. But there's a pattern there. She makes a lot of money, but it all goes away. So she was struggling, and I mean, lots of money. She couldn't even see where it went, but she was struggling. And that had been her pattern, like from her entire young adult life. Now it's just and two traumas were cleared that came up for Mary. One was in this lifetime that she was aware of partly. When Mary was about 5 years old, she lived, her next door neighbor was a man that she adored. And he was a big wig CEO guy who embezzled a lot of money, millions of dollars, and went to jail, and it broke her heart. She made an unconscious decision, so that, you know, limited belief, that says money, a lot of money bring pain to people, and it destroys families, and it breaks people's heart. That got lodged in her field. And the second layer of that story was Mary also had a lifetime where she was a merchant that had a lot of money and did great harm to people. And so there was a karmic thing going on there that said, now we need to balance this. And that's very much also in the Eastern tradition, Elise, as you know, the karmas and so on. So we cleared the trauma that she had picked up around the money and the neighbor, and cleared and made right the lifetime when she was so out of integrity, and laid down a karmic imprint in her field for reckoning in this lifetime. 10 days after we did that clearing, she sent me a text message, and she said, and she had a money ceiling. She couldn't, no matter how hard she worked, she wouldn't make more than, now mind you, it was a lot still, but she wouldn't go over that threshold. She received 2 checks in the mail unexpectedly, totaling $43,000, including one on a settlement that she had been denied years ago. And out of the blue, they just sent her this check. And so she, you know, that was a money wound for her. And so once that was cleared, and now a year later, I think year and a half later, she's made more money in 1 year than she did in any other year, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting, especially because she had something that happened in this life when she was young. And do you think the traumas when we're younger impact us more, or at another stage in life? Do you find that they're all equal, or?
I think it's a little bit of both. Traumas when we're young oftentimes get so deeply buried for survival's sake.
Yeah.
So what I typically have to do more digging. And oftentimes a person will come to me and will say something like, wow, my boss doesn't value me, doesn't promote me no matter how hard I work. And that's a real trauma in this moment. But I will trace it to a younger time, say 3 years old, 2 years old, when mom or dad might have said, that's not a good job that you're doing, you know, you're not valuable or whatever. Now, this adult that I'm working with does not remember what happened at 2, but I'll track it back into that younger time, and I'll ask the question, share with me what happened when you were 2 or 3 years old. And a lot of times, like 90% of the times, the moment I say that, wow, they're dropped right back in the memory of that 2, and the tears start coming. Oh yeah, when I was 2 years old, my dad told me I would never be smart as my brother, or whatever the deal. So I guess it's the long answer to say the younger traumas are more deeply buried, and the older ones, say middle school and so on, they're more present and easily recalled.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
Wow.
Both is devastating, mind you. And sometimes even the younger ones, the ones that happen in younger times, can even be more damaging because that trauma causes that person to alter their personality, alter who they are. So oftentimes when I go back and I unwind that early trauma, something, an aspect of that person's self, like whether it's an archetype or a part of the self that got buried to survive because of that trauma, now has the freedom to come back on board. So there's just more expansion for that person.
Wow. It makes me want to do some work with you. I wonder if Karen has any other questions. And then I want to talk about your meditation that I love.
The one thing that I'm getting from all this is that I'm one that digs deep inside to try to figure out why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And when you brought up a childhood trauma, when I was an infant, so I don't remember it, I just remember the stories. My mother was hanging out clothes in the backyard, and my brother was told to watch me in my baby buggy. And he decided that he was going to rock it. Okay. And he rocked it, and I went flying, and all my fingernails tore off. And the first time I went to get a manicure, I remember screaming that it hurt. And my mother reminded me, she said, well, that's probably because your fingernails are so thin. And I never thought about it again. But about 5-10 years ago, I started going for manicures regularly and was getting, the gel nails and stuff. And I found that I was really feeling sick for months when I was getting it done. Now, as we're talking about this, it almost seems like there is a correlation. I won't let anybody else do my fingernails. I do them myself, and I do them with a lot of care. And now I'm piecing it together. This sort of makes sense, that there's that trauma that I had, and it's still with me.
Yeah. That is spot on, Karen. You've nailed it, and I'm glad that you kind of put the pieces, like it feels like a big puzzle piece. That
Yes.
final puzzle piece kind of fell in place for you, and that's exactly what it is. Because even if your physical body did not store the trauma, which yours did, the part of your body that had the trauma directly, affecting it, definitely stored it in, and we've heard about cellular memory, where this, but your field also made note of that. So Karen had this trauma at this time, and your field writes it in very neatly in your records.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that you began to want to get manicures. And I did notice your color. If you're listening, she's got a colorful, multicolored manicure. So it speaks to self-healing too. I mean, I think it's often great to have a guide, a shaman. We'd all love to have a shaman helping us out, but it also speaks to that awareness. When we are aware, we start to bring up the traumas and we find ways. I think sometimes there are things that we need help with. Often we can connect on our own and do self-healing, and then we find out, it's connected to something else. And it's like putting a puzzle together to become whole. And on that, I'd love to hear a little bit about your meditation. I know about it because I've shared it with people on my email list. And what I love about it is it's a brilliant, very fast meditation. Because for me, I meditate in the morning, sometimes in the evening. But in the middle of the day, sometimes, or, something emotional happens, I don't have time to do a lot, but Li-Sann has a 5-minute meditation. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. This is, so light is the creative force of everything. So light in its purest form, whether it's an emanation of the gold ray or the crystalline white ray, are some of the tools that I work with as the light alchemist. And so these different frequencies of light, if we harness them in a particular way with focused intention and belief, then they really can move dense energy particles out of our physical, mental, and emotional, those three subtle bodies. So this meditation brings in a very high frequency of the golden light, which is a part of a transmission light. I want to say system that I harness to work with clients. So bringing in that frequency, and in just as short time as 5 minutes, as Elise is saying, there can be just a nice flushing and release of dense energy, whether it's in our emotions or the mental body, and just brings a nice refreshing reset to the field. It can be done anywhere. I've done it in airport lounges where things get so dense and so on. And the benefit to doing this meditation quite often, or as frequently as one can, is that it allows our mental body, emotional body, and physical body to really just constantly get a reset from the world around us. Einstein said that everything in the universe is made up of energy, frequency, and vibration. So even listening to a neighbor having a fight is a discordant energy that gets lodged in our field. And so this light meditation is great for just giving us a quick, refreshing reset. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very soothing. And I have to say, I like to look around on YouTube for meditations, and a lot of them, to me, to be quite frank, they're sometimes irritating, the voices or the sounds, but yours is just, it's way up there. It's one of my favorites. And it's even faster than most of them. A lot of the short meditations on YouTube are like 10 minutes, or there's hours and hours. So we're going to put a link to the meditation in the show notes. And yeah, it's like taking an internal shower, and you can do it anywhere. Like Li-Sann said, in the airport. I'm sure there's other places. Don't do it while you're driving.
No.
Meditate while you're driving.
I've done it in Sam's Club when we have the forever line.
Oh,
yeah. Because, and yeah, because we have such busy lives, Elise, and certainly there are longer times when we can sit, and we do need to sit for longer time sometimes, but just to have a really quick, simple tool, if you're at your desk or in between a client, to just refresh, that I think is lovely too.
yeah.
And Elise, thank you so much for sharing this with your audience.
Of course. Yeah, I think it's great. Meditation is a great tool for the brain, for aging. And if you've never meditated, it's actually a good tool too, because some people may not meditate, but 5 minutes, I think, we can do. There are some 2 1-minute, but this 5-minute one is very, I want to say, just doable and friendly. It's friendly to everyone.
Wonderful.
Thank you. And the benefits are great. There's so much that comes on the back end of that 5 minutes that it's so worth it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us, Li-Sann. And I also have a sound meditation and yoga healing workshop coming up. I put the link in the bio, and I know you're a sound healer too, so we'll have to have you back again for more because I forgot to even ask you about that. We're about at our end of our interview.
Well, it was great having both of you on today. And as always, take care of yourself. Self-care is very, very important. And stay well. And we'll see you all again soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Bye-bye.
Bye.